good morning once again. Thank you for joining me here on the beach for a beautiful sunrise. I can't say enough wonderful things about this experience every morning. I'm so grateful that I'm able to do this. So if you saw one of my past videos, was called Why I Quit Drinking. One of the things that I mentioned in there was about the consequences, and ultimately the consequences of my drinking is why I quit. You know, I always get a kick out of the comments. I like to respond to them as often as I can. I try not to miss responding to any of the comments. But one of the comments was, what were the consequences? And it's kind of hard to reply to that comment with what the consequences were without creating an entire video devoted to that. And so that's what I'm attempting to do this morning, is to give you a video that maps out the consequences of my drinking that ultimately brought me to the point that I was ready to give up the alcohol once and for all. So that's what we're going to talk about. So let me start by saying that I didn't experience consequences right away. Oh no, not at all. In fact, I had a blast in the beginning of my drinking. I did a lot of fun stuff and enjoyed myself immensely. You know, the worst thing that really was going on was maybe a hangover. Some of the first consequences that, you know, I just poo-pooed it as like, that's part of drinking, I guess, you know, was blackouts. I'd wake up the next morning and really not remember what happened. And that can be kind of scary, because you got to kind of put the pieces together by what your friends have to say about what happened. The blackouts were kind of a normal thing as far as I was concerned. If you were a drinker, you had blackouts. You know, I've come to realize that's not necessarily true. Blackouts happen with alcoholics and people who just plain old drink too damn much. Blackouts are not a normal thing. If you're experiencing blackouts, if you're not alcoholic, you're on your way. So anyway, you know, those were consequences that I felt like I could live with. These kind of consequences, the hangovers, the blackouts, you know, maybe not feeling well enough to go to work the next day. Those were just byproducts of my drinking. What I did was I continued to drink, of course, because I was having fun. Well, some of you may have gotten to the point where it's not quite as fun as it used to be. And maybe, I don't know, maybe you've decided to back off a little. Maybe not drink quite so much, or limit how many you have. And I tried that, but what I found was that if I tried to control my drinking, I couldn't enjoy it. And if I enjoyed it, I certainly couldn't control it. So one of my earliest recollections of any kind of negative consequences had to do with a speeding ticket. Now, you know, some could argue that this was not related to my drinking, except that I was on my way to the bar, and I was in a hurry. I got pulled over for speeding on my way to the bar. The interesting thing about that is that, you know, it's real easy for not only for you, but for me too, to say, well, that has nothing to do with my drinking, except that it did. Like I said, I was in a hurry. I was trying to get to the bar, and I was pulled over, stone cold sober at the moment. And I got a speeding ticket. So, you know, I was like, okay, yeah, come on, let's get this over with so I can get to the bar, right? So I got the speeding ticket, and I brought it into the bar with me. And I showed it to my friends, you know, and They were all buying me drinks. Oh, that's too bad, man. Here, let me buy you a drink, you know. So even though it was a consequence, it actually turned out kind of good for me because people were buying me drinks. I looked at that as a good thing, right? You know, I didn't just drink for a couple of years. I began my drinking career very early in life. In fact, when I was way too young to buy it, but I wasn't too young to steal it. My very first recollection of drinking anything included illegal activity. So you can see where it was a real setup for me. My first drink was from a bottle of MD 2020. If any of you are unfamiliar with that, it's cheap wine. Very, very cheap wine. And the thing that turned me on about it was the shape of the bottle. It was kind of like a pint of whiskey, only bigger. It was flat bottle, not a round bottle, but a flat bottle. And I could stuff it down my pants, pull my t-shirt over top of it, and walk out of the store with it at 14 years old. And that's exactly what I did. I went out in the woods with my friends, and I drank that entire bottle to myself. So my very first experience with alcohol, I drank it alcoholically. Now, not everybody starts out like that, but I did. And I started out with illegal activity. It almost went together, you know? The drinking and the illegal activity. I didn't get in trouble every time I was drinking, but every time I got in trouble, I had been drinking. I made really bad choices in life when I drank. And so that led me to a life of, I don't want to say a life of crime, but a life of legal problems. Because it seems like, and some of you who are involved in any kind of legal problems, you can relate to this, but once you're in the system, it seems like it's always there, just like waiting for you to mess up again so it can pull you back into the system and steal some more time away from your life. So yes, I did wind up in the end with a lot of legal problems. And those were some of the major consequences in my life. But don't let me skip ahead here, because there were a lot of consequences that had nothing to do with legal. Some of the consequences I had were with family. No longer was I even trusted. You know, in my previous video, I talked about the wife, throwing me out of the house. That's a consequence. You know, at the time I was in business for myself, I had a little woodworking shop where I restored antiques. Dusty old shop that had chemical smell to it, you know, from using lacquers and things of that nature. I lived there. I'd come back to it every night, drunk, and pass out on a dusty couch in my office. Not a very good life. That was the consequences. And you see, I can remember at the time thinking to myself, man, this is great. Nobody to tell me I can't drink. Nobody to give me a hard time about my drinking. I can drink as much as I want. I can come back to my pad and continue to drink if I want to. Hell, there's a refrigerator here and everything. Wow. That was the life, huh? So the relationship with the wife deteriorated. My relationship with my children went south as well, because they couldn't trust that I would be there, completely be there for them. Even my mother, she got involved in the church choir and invited me to come to a Christmas thing at her church where she was singing in the choir. You think I could stay sober and show up? No, I couldn't. I may not have been drunk, but I was certainly hurting. I was hungover bad and like kind of nodding off during the whole thing. And she saw all that. You know, let's talk about finances for a minute. How much money did I lose over my drinking? How many jobs? And I've been in business for myself for years, so when I say jobs, I don't mean employment type jobs, but like clients. How many clients in the past have I lost because of, maybe not because of my drinking, but because of my lifestyle that included drinking? The consequences began to get progressive, just as the disease of alcoholism is progressive, so are its consequences. And I really began to feel the effects of those consequences on my life. Now, when you think of a drinker and legal consequences, you probably go straight to the thought, well, it's probably DUIs. Well, surprise, surprise, I've never had a DUI. It's funny because I use that as an excuse for, oh, I don't belong in recovery. Hell, I've never even had a DUI. No, I haven't. Have I ever deserved one? Hell yeah, many, many times. Many, many times. In fact, the last time that I drank, I got pulled over behind the wheel drunk. Now, it bears explaining why I did not get a DUI. And the reason is because I was driving a stolen car. I guess the DUI kind of pales in comparison to Grand Theft Auto. Talk about consequences. That was my ultimate consequence. You see, the type of alcoholic I am, while I'm under the influence, I make major, life-changing decisions and choices that affect my life. Not only do they affect my life, they affect the lives of the people around me, the people I care about. Bad choices. Bad choices made while under the influence. Can anybody relate to that? I would think that you can. Anyway, I wound up losing my freedom. That was the ultimate consequence for me. 3.5 years in prison. I didn't want to see what the next one was going to look like. And I still don't want to see what the next one's going to look like. It motivated me. Something about pain that motivates us, makes us want to stay sober. Now, I've talked about some of the consequences of my drinking, some of the things that happened that gave me a desire to get sober. But that's just some of them. There are other consequences. You know, I had legal consequences, financial consequences. I had, relationship consequences. All of those things led me to coming to that strong desire to get sober. But there are other consequences that I didn't experience, and some people do. For example, health. I just lost an old friend to cirrhosis of the liver. She just couldn't come to the realization that it was killing her. And if she did, she decided it was worth it. Alcohol is cunning, baffling, and powerful. It'll make you think that it's good, when in actuality, it's one of the worst things that we can do to ourselves, is pour alcohol in our system. So today, not only do I stay sober one day at a time, But I enjoy being sober. I enjoy the life that recovery affords me. It really is a much better way to live. I'm healthier. My relationships are healthier. And today, I get to live happy, joyous, and free. And I hope you will too. You don't have to experience those consequences. You can stop now. You can use the experiences of others as a tool to give you the willingness and the open-mindedness to do something about your drinking. So I'll see you guys on the next video. Bye-bye.